It was just gathering dust, Dad, my daughter Jess snapped, her voice as cold as the empty space in the velvet box. Mom would want me to have a future, not cling to some old piece of metal. She had sold her mother's wedding ring, the ring I had designed, the symbol of a 50-year love story, to fund a fleeting romance. She thought she had sold a memory for a pittance. She had no idea she had just sold her home, her security, her entire world. Because as she slept that night, I called the realtor. Before we continue, subscribe. You are about to witness how I, an old carpenter, used my quiet tools to deconstruct my daughter's world and teach her a lesson in what is truly priceless. Before the empty box, before the cold words and the broken trust, there was the wood, and there was Jess. My workshop wasn't just a place of sawdust and steel. It was the heart of our home, the place where I built not just furniture but a life. Eleanor, my wife, my soulmate for 50 years, always said she could tell my mood by the scent coming from the workshop. Pine meant I was content, oak meant I was thoughtful, and cedar meant I was creating something special for my family. And Jess, she was my little apprentice. From the time she could walk, she would toddle into my sanctuary, her tiny hands reaching for the smooth, curved pieces of wood. I taught her the feel of a good piece of timber, the patience of sanding a surface until it was as smooth as glass, the magic of bringing a creation to life from a simple block of pine. Slowly, Jessie, I'd say, guiding her small hand. Let the wood tell you what it wants to be. Her mother, Eleanor, would watch us from the doorway, her smile a beacon of warmth that lit up the entire space. Our life was not built on wealth or status. It was built on things we made ourselves. The kitchen table where we shared every meal, I crafted that from an old oak tree that fell in our yard. The rocking chair where Eleanor nursed Jess, that was made of cherry wood, a gift for our first anniversary. Every piece in our home had a story, a history, a piece of my heart embedded in its grain. We weren't just a family, we were a team. When Eleanor was diagnosed with the illness that would eventually take her from us, that team was tested. The medical bills began to pile up, a relentless tide of sterile white envelopes. I worked tirelessly, taking on extra commissions, repairing furniture for neighbors, doing anything to keep us afloat. Jess, then in high school, saw the strain. She got a part-time job at the local diner, her small paychecks going directly into the jar we kept on the kitchen counter labeled, "For Mom." During those difficult years, I saw a strength in her, a resilience that made me proud. She would come home smelling of coffee and fried food, sit at the kitchen table and do her homework, never complaining. On her mother's last night, the three of us were together in the bedroom I had built, in the bed I had crafted. Jess held her mother's hand, her face a mask of quiet teenage grief, and she was the one who was strong for me. After Eleanor passed, the house grew quiet. The vibrant color of our lives faded to a muted gray. It was just me and Jess. I poured all my energy into her future. She was bright, with dreams that went far beyond our small town. She wanted to study business, to create something of her own. I knew I had to give her that chance. I sold my old beloved truck. I took out a second mortgage on the house. I made sure she had everything she needed for college, without the burden of debt. The day I dropped her off at her dorm, she hugged me tightly. "I'll make you proud, Dad," she had whispered. And I believed her. But the world she entered was different from mine. It was a world of fast trends, of online influencers, of a constant hungry desire for more. When she came home for holidays, she was different. Her clothes were more expensive, her conversation filled with brand names and the exploits of people I had never heard of. She started to look at our home, the home I had built, with a new, critical eye. "Dad, this wallpaper is so dated," she'd say, wrinkling her nose. "And this furniture, it's so heavy." I tried to explain the stories, the history behind each piece. But she wasn't listening. She was looking at it through a different lens, the lens of a social media feed, where everything old was embarrassing and everything handmade was simply cheap. Then came Ryan. He was everything I was not. Slick, fast-talking, with a smile that never quite reached his eyes. He drove a flashy sports car, leased, I later found out, and spoke of investment opportunities and disrupting the market. He filled Jess's head with dreams of a glamorous life, a life of luxury travel and effortless wealth. And he saw me as a relic, a stumbling block. I saw the way he looked around my house, his eyes not seeing the love and history, but doing a cold, quick calculation of its property value. I saw the way he subtly belittled my life's work. "A carpenter? That's quaint," he said once, with a dismissive smirk. Jess, blinded by infatuation, defended him. "He's an entrepreneur, Dad. He thinks big. You just don't understand his world." Perhaps she was right. I didn't understand a world where a man's worth was measured by the car he drove, not the things he could build. I didn't understand a world where history was something to be deleted, not cherished. The final precious piece of her mother I had kept was the wedding ring. I had designed it myself, a simple band of gold, twisting like two vines, with a single small diamond, all I could afford at the time. Inside, I had engraved the words, "Our hands build." It was the creed of our marriage, our life. After Eleanor passed, I couldn't bear to see her finger bare, but I also couldn't part with it. So I kept it, safe, in a velvet box in my bedside table. One evening, Jess asked me about it. Ryan was with her. "Dad, can I see Mom's ring?" she asked. I showed it to her. She held it in her palm, and I saw a flicker of the old Jess, the girl who understood its value. But then Ryan spoke. "Wow," he said, his voice dripping with a fake connoisseur's tone. "A classic piece. You know, Jess, a vintage ring like that could be worth a lot. It could be the seed money for our new online fashion boutique." A cold dread washed over me. I took the ring back gently. "It's not for sale, Ryan," I said, my voice firm. "It's priceless." He had just laughed. "Everything has a price, Thomas. Everything." From that day on, I knew. They saw the ring not as a symbol of love, but as a commodity, an asset waiting to be liquidated. I should have seen the betrayal coming. But a father's love is a stubborn, foolish thing. It always wants to believe in the best version of a child, even when all the evidence points to the worst. And it was that foolish love that left the door open for the heartbreak that was to come. After that night, a coldness settled between Jess and me. She stopped talking about her business plans, and Ryan stopped coming over. I told myself it was a good sign, that they had understood my boundaries. But the silence wasn't peaceful. It was the heavy, watchful silence of a predator stalking its prey. They were not respecting my wishes. They were simply waiting for a better opportunity. The opportunity came in the form of a manufactured crisis. Jess called me one afternoon, her voice a performance of pure panic. "Dad, our apartment! There was a leak from the unit above. Everything is ruined. The landlord says it'll take weeks to repair. We have nowhere to go." My heart, the foolish, fatherly heart, went out to her. "Of course you can stay here," I said without a second's hesitation. "Your old room is just as you left it." They arrived that evening, not with a few overnight bags, but with half of their apartment. Boxes, computers, clothes racks. It was not the luggage of a temporary guest. It was the equipment of an occupying force. Ryan, ever the opportunist, immediately claimed my small study as his home office. Jess, with a breezy confidence, began to update the living room, pushing my handcrafted furniture aside to make room for her sleek modern beanbags and minimalist lamps. "It just needs a little freshening up, Dad," she'd say, her smile bright and dismissive. To make it more us. They treated my home like a temporary inconvenience they were entitled to remodel. My quiet routines were shattered. My space was invaded. But I tolerated it. For Jess, I told myself it was only for a few weeks. I endured Ryan's loud, self-important business calls at all hours. I endured Jess's constant, subtle criticisms of my old-fashioned way of life. I endured the feeling of being a guest in the very house I had built. The final betrayal was not a dramatic confrontation. It was a quiet, cowardly act, committed in the dead of night. I had woken up thirsty, and as I walked past my own bedroom, I noticed the door was slightly ajar. I never left it ajar. A cold knot of dread tightened in my stomach. I walked in and went straight to the bedside table. I didn't need to open the drawer. I could feel it. The emptiness. I opened it anyway. The velvet box was there, but it was light. Too light. I lifted the lid, and there it was. Nothing. An empty space where a 50-year love story used to be. The air left my lungs. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. It was a physical pain, a sharp, stabbing grief that was almost as bad as the day Eleanor had passed. It wasn't just a ring. It was her presence, her memory, the last tangible piece of our life together. And it was gone. I didn't storm into her room. I didn't shout. The carpenter in me, the man who understood that a structure is only as strong as its weakest point, knew that uncontrolled rage was a weakness. I simply went back to bed and lay there, staring into the darkness as the full, devastating reality of what my daughter had become washed over me. She hadn't just taken something from me. She had sold a piece of her own mother's soul for a down payment on a shallow dream, brokered by a cheap con man. I waited. I waited until I heard her moving. In the kitchen the next morning, the cheerful clatter of coffee cups a grotesque soundtrack to my silent grief. I walked in, holding the empty velvet box in my hand. I placed it on the kitchen table between us. She saw it. And for a split second, I saw a flicker of panic, of guilt in her eyes. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by a hardened, defensive glare she had learned from Ryan. "Where is it, Jess?" I asked, my voice a quiet, level calm that was more terrifying than any shout. She didn't feign ignorance. She didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. She just shrugged, a casual, dismissive gesture that broke my heart all over again. "I needed the money, Dad," she said, her voice matter-of-fact. "For the business. Ryan says we're on the verge of a major breakthrough. This was the only way." "The only way," I repeated, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. And that's when she delivered the line, the one that severed the final frayed thread of our relationship. "It was just gathering dust, Dad. Mom would want me to have a future, not cling to some old piece of metal." Her mother. She dared to speak for her mother. Eleanor, a woman who had cherished memories over money, who had found joy in the simple, handmade things of our life. Eleanor, who would have been horrified to see her daughter's heart become so hard, so transactional. The grief inside me crystallized. It turned from a hot, agonizing pain into a cold, hard, and perfectly clear diamond of resolve. I looked at my daughter, at her defiant face, at the stranger she had become, and I no longer saw the little girl I had taught to sand pine. I saw a structural failure, a support beam that had rotted from the inside out, a part of my life's structure that was no longer sound, that was, in fact, threatening to bring the whole building down. I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I simply picked up the empty box, a hollow symbol of a hollow love. "I see," I said. And in that moment, I think she mistook my quiet calm for surrender. She thought she had won. She had gotten the money, and she had faced down her sentimental old father. She turned back to her coffee, dismissing me, dismissing the entire history that the empty box represented. She didn't see the change in my eyes, She didn't see the carpenter, the builder, the man who had spent his life creating and repairing, making a new, silent vow. I could not repair her character. I could not rebuild her soul. But I could deconstruct the world she thought she was, so cleverly building. I would not do it with anger. I would do it with the same quiet, methodical precision I used to build a house. I would find the load-bearing walls of her life, and I would remove them, one by one, until the entire flimsy structure came crashing down around her. The lesson would not be about the value of a ring. It would be about the cost of a betrayal. And it was a price she was about to start paying. For the rest of that day, I played the part of the defeated old man. I was quiet, withdrawn. Jess and Ryan likely saw it as the sulking of a child who had lost an argument. They went about their business, their voices bright with the thrill of their new venture, funded by the sale of my wife's soul. Their casual cruelty was a constant, low-frequency hum in the background of my silent planning. They were so confident in my weakness, so sure of their victory, that they became careless. That evening, I heard them in the living room celebrating. Ryan was on the phone with an investor, his voice booming with a salesman's false bravado. Yes, the seed money is secured. A private family investment. We're launching the eLux Boutique website in 2 weeks. This is going to be huge. We're talking a 6-figure return in the first quarter. eLux Boutique. The name was as cheap and pretentious as he was. I wrote it down. While they dreamed of their digital empire, I retreated to my sanctuary. But my workshop was no longer a place of nostalgic creation. It had become a war room. I didn't reach for my saws or my chisels. I reached for the tools I had learned to use long before I learned to work with wood, logic, research, and meticulous planning. My first call was to an old friend, a man named Arthur Hayes, a retired private investigator. I had built a custom library for years ago. Arthur, I said, I need some information. It's a delicate matter. It's about my daughter. I didn't tell him the whole story. I didn't need to. I just gave him a name, Ryan, and another name, eLux Boutique. I want to know everything, I said. His finances, his history, his business partners, and I want to know the exact structure of this new company. I want a full set of blueprints on their entire operation. Consider it done, Thomas, he said, his voice betraying no surprise. In his line of work, he had seen the dark underbelly of families many times before. While Arthur began his digital reconnaissance, I started my own, more subtle investigation. I used the persona they had assigned to me, the quiet, slightly befuddled old man, to my advantage. The next morning, I accidentally stumbled into the study while Ryan was on a video call. Oh, sorry, I mumbled, pretending to be looking for my reading glasses. Didn't mean to interrupt, but in those few seconds, I saw everything I needed to see. The name of the web design company on his screen, the logo of the payment processing service they were using. Small details. But a carpenter knows that a large structure is held together by small, crucial joints. Later that day, while Jess was out, I feigned confusion about the new television remote. Ryan, my boy, I said, my voice deliberately shaky. Could you help an old man out? I can't seem to figure out this newfangled contraption. As he patiently showed me the buttons, I asked him, with the casual curiosity of a clueless grandfather, about their business. So this online thing, it's like a shop, but on the computer? He was condescending, but happy to boast. He explained their drop-shipping model, how they were sourcing cheap, mass-produced accessories from overseas, rebranding them as exclusive, and marking them up by 1,000%. He talked about their social media strategy, about using influencers to create a false sense of luxury and demand. He was so proud of his own cleverness, his ability to create an illusion of value out of thin air. He didn't realize he was handing me the very schematics of his own downfall. He was showing me in precise detail exactly where the load-bearing walls of his flimsy business were, and I took careful mental notes. For the next week, I was a ghost in my own home, a silent archivist of their arrogance. I listened to their phone calls. I observed their work habits. I gathered the data I needed, and I waited for Arthur's report. It arrived a week later, a simple manila envelope dropped in my mailbox. The contents were as devastating as I had expected. Ryan was a small-time grifter with a history of failed get-rich-quick schemes and a mountain of personal debt. The E-Lux boutique was registered solely in Jess's name, likely to protect it from his creditors. The seed money, the money from my wife's ring, had been deposited into her account. The entire venture was a house of cards, built with stolen funds, and propped up by my daughter's blind trust and Ryan's boundless arrogance. But the report contained one more crucial detail. A single, beautiful flaw in their design. The web hosting service they were using, the payment processor, and the overseas supplier were all connected through a single parent corporation based in Singapore. A corporation that was known for its strict anti-fraud policies. Any credible claim of fraudulent seed money could trigger an internal investigation that would freeze their accounts and sever their supply chain instantly. I sat at my drafting table, all the pieces in front of me. Ryan's debts, Jess's legal liability, the supplier's anti-fraud policy, and the beautiful, undeniable proof I held in my hand. A certified appraisal of Eleanor's ring, which I had had done years ago for insurance purposes, and a notarized affidavit from me stating that it was a personal, priceless family heirloom that was taken without my consent. I did not need a lawyer. I did not need a courtroom. I had something far more powerful. I had a precise, undeniable, and devastating truth. And I was about to deliver it, not with a sledgehammer, but with the quiet, surgical precision of a single, well-placed email. The deconstruction was about to begin. The house they thought they were building was about to be condemned before the foundation was even dry. A good carpenter knows that you don't demolish a structure with wild swings of a sledgehammer. That's for amateurs. A professional finds the key structural joints and applies precise targeted pressure. You don't shatter the building, you persuade it to collapse under the weight of its own flawed design. My children's business, the E-Lux Boutique, was a poorly designed structure held together by nothing more than arrogance and my wife's stolen legacy. And I had found the main support beam, the parent corporation in Singapore, the one that controlled their entire operation from web hosting to payment processing, was my target. I had spent a day crafting the email. It was not an angry, rambling letter from a wronged father. It was a formal, professional, and chillingly precise fraud report from an anonymous but concerned third party. The subject line was simple: urgent, fraudulent seed money investigation regarding your client, E-Lux Boutique. The body of the email was a masterpiece of detached, factual reporting. I laid out the evidence with the clarity of a blueprint. I attached the scanned appraisal of Eleanor's ring, highlighting its significant monetary and sentimental value. I attached my notarized affidavit, stating clearly that the ring was taken without my consent and that its proceeds, which I could prove were the sole source of their initial funding, were therefore the proceeds of a theft. I didn't mention my name. I didn't mention my relationship to Jess. I simply presented the facts. Their client's entire business was founded on illicit funds. I knew from Arthur's research that a corporation of this size, operating in the complex world of international finance, would have zero tolerance for being associated with this kind of activity. The risk to their reputation would be far greater than the value of one small upstart client. I concluded the email with a single powerful sentence. I have forwarded this information to my legal counsel and will be proceeding with formal charges. If this matter is not addressed internally by your compliance department within 48 hours. I hit send. The first cut had been made. Now all I had to do was wait for the structural stress to begin. I didn't have to wait long. For the next 24 hours, Jess and Ryan were living in a fool's paradise. Their website launched. They popped a bottle of cheap champagne, celebrating. In my living room, toasting to their own genius. I watched them from the doorway, a silent, invisible ghost at their feast. They were so busy admiring the facade of their new creation that they had no idea I had just sawed through the main support beam in the basement. The first sign of trouble came the next morning. I was in the kitchen, making my coffee, when I heard a frantic cry from the study. "What? What do you mean the site is down?" It was Jess. Her voice was sharp with panic. I heard Ryan trying to reassure her. "It's probably just a server glitch. I'll call the hosting company." I took a slow sip of my coffee. It wasn't a glitch. It was the beginning of the collapse. I heard Ryan on the phone, his voice shifting from confident to confused, and then to angry. "What do you mean, account suspended pending an internal review? A review of what? This is unacceptable. We just launched." While he was shouting at a helpless customer service representative, an email notification pinged on Jess's laptop. I saw her face drain of color as she read it. She looked like she had just seen a ghost. "Ryan," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It's the payment processor. They've frozen our account. All incoming funds are on hold." "What?" he bellowed, slamming the phone down. "They can't do that. We have orders coming in." Another ping. This one from their overseas supplier. "Jess," Ryan read the email over her shoulder, his voice now a mixture of rage and disbelief. "Our account has been flagged. All shipments are suspended until their risk management department completes an investigation." "An investigation into what?" The dominoes were falling one by one, exactly as I had designed. Their website was offline. Their ability to take money was frozen. Their supply chain was severed. Their entire business, the one they had celebrated just hours before, was now dead in the water. And they had no idea why. They were trapped in a crumbling building and they couldn't see the demolition expert who had just walked calmly out the front door. The beauty of the plan was its anonymity. It wasn't me, their angry father, attacking them. It was the cold, impersonal machinery of corporate compliance. It was the faceless, unassailable power of a system that they had tried to join, now turning against them. The next 48 hours were a masterclass in psychological disintegration. I had removed the external supports of their venture. Now, I just had to watch as the internal structure began to buckle under the strain. The silence from the Singaporean corporation was absolute. Jess's emails went unanswered. Ryan's calls were rerouted to a placid, unhelpful automated system. They were stonewalled, ghosted by the very system they had aspired to master. I continued, my performance as the oblivious old man. I would shuffle into the study, offering them a sandwich or a cup of tea, my face a mask of grandfatherly concern. "Is everything all right, kids? You seem a little stressed." "We're fine, Dad," Jess would snap, her voice frayed with anxiety. "It's just new business logistics. You wouldn't understand." "Of course," I'd mumble, shuffling away, but not before I saw the way she looked at Ryan, her eyes filled with a new corrosive doubt. The pressure began to turn their alliance into a cage match. Their conversations, which I could hear through the thin walls of my old house, devolved from panicked strategy sessions into bitter, ugly accusations. "This is your fault, Ryan," I heard Jess cry one evening. "Your shady history. Maybe they looked you up. Maybe they know you're a bad risk." "My fault," he shot back, his voice dripping with venom. "I'm not the one whose name is on the company, am I? You're the one they're investigating. What did you do? What did you lie about on the application?" The irony was exquisite. He, the grifter, was accusing her of being the liability. He had used her clean name to secure the business, and now he was using it as a shield to deflect the blame. "I didn't lie about anything," she sobbed. "You must have," he insisted. "Think, Jess. What could it be? There has to be a reason. They were trapped in a dark room searching for a black cat that wasn't there. They were looking for complex corporate conspiracies, for hidden enemies, for anything other than the simple, devastating truth that was sitting quietly in the living room, reading a book on woodworking. They could not conceive that the source of their sophisticated international business problem was a simple local carpenter they had already dismissed. My greatest weapon was their own condescension. The true genius of my plan was that it didn't just attack their business, it attacked their core identities. Ryan's identity was built on being the clever one, the man with the angles, the one who could outsmart the system. Now, he was being outsmarted by a faceless entity he couldn't comprehend, and it was driving him mad. Jess's identity was built on escaping my world, on becoming a modern, successful girl boss. Now, her dream was being strangled in its crib, and she had no one to blame but the partner she had chosen over her own father. The breaking point came on the third day. A formal final email arrived from the Singaporean corporation. I saw Jess open it, her hands trembling. I watched from the hallway as her face went from hope to horror. "What is it?" Ryan demanded, peering over her shoulder. She couldn't speak. She just pointed at the screen. I knew what it said. It was the email I had carefully crafted in my initial report, a single devastating paragraph that I had suggested they include in their final determination. "Dear Miss Jess's last name," Ryan read aloud, his voice cracking. "Following a thorough review, our compliance department has determined that the seed funding for eLux Boutique was derived from the unauthorized sale of a high-value, sentimental family asset, constituting a breach of our ethical partnership guidelines. As our corporation cannot be associated with activities of this nature, all accounts and services related to your business are hereby permanently terminated. We reserve the right to cooperate with any and all legal authorities regarding this matter." The room was silent. The final load-bearing wall had just been removed. "High-value, sentimental, family asset," Ryan repeated, the words slow and heavy, like stones. He turned to look at Jess, his eyes no longer angry, but cold with a terrible, dawning comprehension. "The ring," he whispered. "Your father's ring." Jess just stared at him, her face a mask of pure, unadulterated terror. "How?" Ryan hissed. "How could they possibly know about the ring?" And in that moment, I watched my daughter's world collapse. She looked from Ryan's accusatory face to the damning email on the screen, and then, slowly, her eyes lifted and met mine in the hallway. She finally saw me, not as a piece of furniture, not as an inconvenience, but as the architect of her ruin. The game was over. She knew. And the look in her eyes was not of anger, but of a profound and terrifying awe. She had picked a fight with a quiet old man, and had discovered, far too late, that she had been playing chess against a grandmaster. I walked into the room. The silence was absolute, broken only by the hum of the laptop that had, moments before, been the portal to their dreams and was now the tombstone of them. I picked up the empty champagne bottle from the desk, a relic from their brief, illusory victory, and placed it in the trash. The gesture was small, mundane, but it was a declaration. The party was over. "You," Ryan breathed, his voice a mixture of awe and hatred. "It was you, the whole time. How?" "You told me how," I said, my voice quiet and even. I looked at him, at his flashy watch and his desperate eyes, and I felt nothing but a cold pity. "You were so proud of your business model, building an illusion of luxury out of cheap materials, creating a brand with no foundation. You thought it was clever. But a structure with no foundation cannot stand, Ryan. It is the first rule of building. A lesson I tried to teach my daughter long ago." My gaze shifted to Jess. She was pale, trembling, her eyes wide with a fear that went beyond the loss of her business. It was the fear of a child who has just realized the true, quiet strength of the parent she had so thoroughly underestimated. "The ring was not seed money, Jess, I said softly. It was the cornerstone of a life your mother and I built with our own hands. You didn't just sell a piece of jewelry, you sold the cornerstone, and a house without a cornerstone falls. But how did you know who to contact? She stammered. The company in Singapore, how could you possibly? You live in a world of screens and apps, and you believe that is where power lies, I said. You forgot that the world is still built on real things, on supply chains, on contracts, on compliance departments run by real people who are very good at protecting their own investments. You showed me your blueprints. I simply sent a copy to the building inspector. Ryan lunged forward, his face contorted with rage. You old man! You've ruined us! You've destroyed everything! No, I said, and my voice, though quiet, stopped him in his tracks. I have destroyed nothing. I have simply held up a mirror. Everything that has happened in the last 48 hours is the direct result of your own choices. The choice to value money over memory. The choice to build a life on a lie. You didn't just get outplayed, Ryan. You got outbuilt. Your structure was flawed from the beginning. He had no answer. His rage collapsed, leaving only a hollow, pathetic despair. I turned my back on him and faced my daughter. This was the final, most painful cut. You, I said, have a choice to make. He, I gestured to the broken man behind me, is not your future. He is a failed investment. You can tie your life to his ruin, or you can cut your losses and start again from the ground up. What? What do you want me to do? She whispered, tears finally streaming down her face. I want nothing from you, I said, and the words were the truest I had ever spoken. This was never about getting the ring back. It was never about the money. It was about a lesson in value. Now it is time for me to go. This house, the one you found so dated, so embarrassing, it is no longer your temporary residence. As of this moment, you are trespassing. I walked out of the study and picked up the small, packed suitcase I had prepared that morning. I had known this moment was coming. Jess followed me into the living room, her face a mask of desperation. Dad, wait! Where are you going? You can't just leave! I am not leaving, I said, pausing at the front door. I am evicting you, not with lawyers and court orders, but with a simple truth. This is my house. It was built on a foundation of love and respect. You have shown respect for neither. Therefore, you no longer have a place here. But where will we go? She cried. I looked at her, at the daughter who had sold her mother's soul for a fleeting dream. You have the money from the ring, I said, my voice cold and final. You wanted a future. You wanted to invest. Go invest in your future. See what it builds you. I opened the front door. The cool evening air felt clean, fresh. I will be back in 24 hours, I said. I expect this house to be empty. If it is not, the next conversation we have will be with the police. I walked out, closing the door gently behind me, leaving them in the ruins of the empire they had tried to build within my walls. I did not look back. The demolition was complete. The site was now cleared for whatever came next. Driving away from my own home, leaving my daughter in the wreckage of her choices, should have felt like a defeat. But it did not. It felt like a liberation. For weeks, I had been a prisoner in my own house, a ghost at my own table. Now, I was free. I had not lost a home. I had reclaimed it by the simple act of walking away and letting the flawed structure collapse under its own weight. I didn't go to a motel. I went to the cabin. The small, simple place Eleanor and I had built together by hand 30 years ago. It was our true sanctuary, a place of quiet and simplicity, a world away from the ambitious, noisy life Jess had chosen. The air here was clean. The silence was real. As I unlocked the door, The familiar scent of cedar and lake water welcomed me home in a way the house in the city no longer could. The next 24 hours were a test of my resolve. I did not call. I did not check on them. I turned off my phone. I sat on the porch, watching the loons on the lake, and I waited. I had laid out the blueprint for their departure. Now, it was up to them to do the work. It was their first, and, most important, act of construction. When I returned to the house the next evening, exactly 24 hours later, it was empty. The silence was profound. Their things were gone. The bean bags, the minimalist lamps, the ghost of their failed ambition. They had left the key on the kitchen table, a silent admission of defeat, but they had left something else behind. In the center of the table was a single, small, and exquisitely crafted wooden box. I recognized my own handiwork. It was a small jewelry box I had made for Eleanor on our 10th anniversary. And resting inside it, on a bed of worn velvet, was her wedding ring. My hands trembled as I picked it up. It was real. How? The money from the sale had been frozen, their accounts locked. How had she gotten it back? A small folded note was tucked underneath. Her handwriting was shaky, childlike. "Dad," it read, "I know this doesn't fix anything. I know it's not enough. After you left, Ryan and we ended. He wanted to fight you, to sue. He said you had no right, but I knew he was wrong. It was never about rights. It was about what was right. He said I was weak, that I was throwing away our future. He left. I used the last of my own savings, the money I had before I met him, to buy it back. The pawn shop owner was a decent man. He understood. He sold it back to me for what he paid. It's not the same. I know it's been tainted, but it belongs here. With you, with her memory. I'm so sorry, Dad. For everything. Jess." I sat there in my quiet kitchen, holding the ring in the palm of my hand. The weight of it felt immense. It was not a victory. It was a tragedy. A story of a daughter who had to lose everything to remember. The value of something that was supposed to be priceless. The days that followed were a period of quiet reclamation. I moved back into my house, but it was different. The silence was no longer heavy with their presence. It was clean. I spent a week in my workshop, not just working, but healing. I took the old, heavy furniture Jess had despised and I began to refinish it. I stripped away the dark, old varnish, sanded the surfaces smooth, and brought out the natural, beautiful grain of the wood that had been hidden for so long. It was a slow, methodical process, a meditation. With each layer of old stain I removed, I felt like I was stripping away a layer of my own grief, my own anger. I did not hear from Jess. I did not expect to. I knew her path would be a long and difficult one. She had to build a new life, a new identity, from the ground up, with no foundation but the harsh lessons she had learned. My own new life began to take shape. I started visiting the local community center, where they had a small, underfunded woodworking shop for seniors. The equipment was old, the space was cramped, but the men and women there had a quiet passion, a desire to create. I started volunteering, sharing my knowledge, teaching them the old techniques, the secrets of a well-made joint, the patience of a fine finish. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of purpose that went beyond my own four walls. I was not just building furniture. I was helping to build a community. I was taking the skills that had built my own life and using them to help others repair theirs. The quiet hum of the workshop, the scent of sawdust, the camaraderie of shared work. It was the music I had been missing. It was the sound of a life being rebuilt. The community workshop became my new project. I used a portion of my own savings, the money I had set aside for a rainy day that had, in fact, arrived as a hurricane, to upgrade the equipment. I built new workbenches, organized the tool storage, and created a space that was not just functional, but inspiring. The classes grew. We weren't just fixing broken chairs, we were mending broken spirits. We were a small community, bound by the simple, honest work of our hands. I had found a new family, a chosen family, built on shared passion and mutual respect. The silence of my house was now filled with the pleasant exhaustion of a day well spent, the anticipation of the next project, the next class. The empty space Eleanor had left was still there, a permanent part of my heart's architecture, but it was no longer a hollow void. It was now filled with new stories, new connections, new purpose. I thought of Jess often, but not with anger anymore. I thought of her with a kind of distant, paternal sorrow. I hoped she was okay. I hoped she was building, not just a career, but a character. One afternoon, as I was closing up the shop, the center's director, a kind woman named Mary, stopped me. "Thomas," she said, "there's someone here to see you. A young woman. She's been waiting for an hour. She said she didn't want to interrupt your class." My heart gave a small, uncertain lurch. I walked into the quiet reception area, and there she was. It was Jess, but she was a different Jess. The trendy, expensive clothes were gone, replaced by simple, practical work attire. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. Her hands, the hands of a business student who had been terrified of a splinter, were not manicured. They were the hands of someone who worked. But the biggest change was in her eyes. The defiant, arrogant glare was gone. In its place was a quiet, profound humility and a deep, soul-crushing exhaustion. She didn't rush to me. She just stood there, as if waiting for permission to speak. "Hello, Dad," she said, her voice quiet, almost hesitant. "Jessica," I replied, my own voice neutral, a calm surface on a sea of roiling emotions. "The workshop," she began, gesturing back towards the sound of the last few people cleaning up. "It looks good. It looks like you." "It's a good place," I said simply. An awkward silence stretched between us. She was the one who broke it. "I got a job," she said, looking down at her hands, "at a cabinet maker's shop, the one on the other side of town. I'm an apprentice. Sanding, staining, learning, the basics. It's hard work." I nodded, saying nothing. I knew the shop. The owner was a tough, old-school master craftsman who did not tolerate shortcuts or laziness. "I sold the car," she continued, her voice barely a whisper. "Ryan's car. I sold my designer clothes, my bags, everything. It wasn't enough to pay back. All the money from the ring. But it's a start. I'm paying it back. A little bit each month. I sent the first payment to your bank account last week. I don't know if you saw it. I had seen it. A small, anonymous deposit of $200. I hadn't known where it came from. Now I did." She finally looked up, and I saw the full weight of the past year in her eyes. "I'm not here to ask for anything," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "I'm not here to ask for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to see that I'm trying. I'm trying to build something. For real this time." I looked at my daughter, this stranger, this apprentice. I saw the blisters on her hands. I saw the sawdust on her jeans, and I saw the first faint glimmer of the girl I thought I had lost forever. The girl who understood the value of things made with patience and care. I did not offer her a hug. I did not offer her empty words of comfort. The damage had been too deep, the betrayal too profound, for a simple, easy reconciliation. Instead, I looked at her hands. "Sanding is the foundation," I said, my voice the voice of a teacher, not a father. "You can't have a fine finish without a perfect surface. Are you keeping the grain straight?" A small, tearful smile touched her lips. "I'm trying," she whispered. "The oak is harder than the pine." "It always is," I said. I turned and walked back toward my workshop. I left the door open. It was not an invitation. Not yet. But it was not a rejection either. It was simply a space, a possibility, a chance for a new structure to be built, slowly, carefully, one painful, honest piece at a time. The first lesson was over. The apprenticeship had just begun. The seasons changed, and with them, so did the grain of our new, fragile reality. Jess did not ask for more than the open door I had left her, but she began to show up, not at the house, not for dinner. She started, attending the Saturday morning open workshop at the community center. She never joined my class. She just found a corner for herself, paid the small fee for materials like everyone else, and she worked. She never spoke to me directly, and I never approached her. Our communication was through the wood. I would watch her from across the room. I saw her struggle with a difficult joint. I saw her frustration when a piece of wood split. And I saw the small, quiet pride on her face when she finally achieved a perfect, seamless finish. She was not just learning a craft. She was engaging in a long, silent conversation with the values she had once discarded. She was learning the language of patience, of precision, of honoring the material. The small, anonymous payments continued to appear in my bank account each month. Never late, never missed. It was a penance, a quiet, consistent effort to repay an unpayable debt. I never acknowledged the money, but I knew it represented more than just cash. It represented her commitment to this new, harder path. One Saturday, a wealthy woman from the town's more affluent side came into the workshop. She wanted a custom-made bookshelf, a large, ornate piece. She was condescending, dismissive of the amateur work being done. I politely explained that we were a community shop, not a high-end furniture store. As she was turning to leave, her eyes fell on the oak panel Jess had just finished sanding. It was flawless, its surface like polished silk, the complex grain of the wood brought to life with a master's touch. "That," the woman said, her tone changing, "is beautiful. Who made that? I want that person to make my bookshelf." All eyes in the workshop turned to Jess in her quiet corner. She looked up, startled, a flush creeping up her neck. She looked at me, her eyes wide with a mixture of pride and panic. I simply nodded, a small, almost imperceptible gesture. "Your work, your credit." I did," Jess said, her voice quiet but clear. "I'm still an apprentice, but I could try." That bookshelf became her masterpiece. For weeks she worked on it, staying late, starting early. She asked for my advice only once on a particularly complex dovetail joint. I didn't give her the answer. I just asked her questions, leading her to find the solution herself, just as I had when she was a little girl. The day she finished it, the whole workshop gathered around to admire it. It was more than just a piece of furniture. It was a testament to her transformation. It was strong, honest, and beautiful in its integrity. The wealthy client was ecstatic. "It's perfect," she gushed. "Absolutely perfect. You have a real gift, young lady. A real gift." She wrote out a check, a sum far larger than Jess had expected. Jess looked at the check, then at me. I saw the question in her eyes. What should she do with this? The first real fruit of her own honest labor. Later that day, after everyone had gone, she approached me as I was sweeping up the sawdust. She was holding an envelope. "Dad," she said, This is for the workshop, for new tools, for the scholarship fund you started for the kids program." I looked at the envelope. It was the check from the client, endorsed over to the community center. "I don't want to pay you back anymore," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I want to pay it forward, like you do, like Mom would have wanted." I finally looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not the ghost of the daughter I had lost, but the solid, real presence of the woman she was becoming. The foundation was no longer cracked. It was sound. I didn't offer her a hug. It still wasn't time for that. Instead, I reached out and ran my hand over the surface of the bookshelf she had built. My weathered carpenter's hand on her flawless creation. "The finish is good," I said, my voice a little rough. Almost as good as your mother's. A single tear rolled down her cheek, but this time it was not a tear of shame or of loss. It was a tear of gratitude, of release. They say time heals all. Wounds. They still lie. Some wounds leave scars forever, but a good carpenter knows that a scar in the wood doesn't have to be a weakness. Sometimes, if it's mended with care and patience, it can become the strongest part of the entire structure. Our relationship was not what it once was. It was quieter, more thoughtful, built not on the easy assumptions of the past, but on the hard-won respect of the present. She never got the fashion boutique. She never got the glamorous life. Instead, she got something far more valuable. She got her hands back. She got her soul back. And I lost a daughter who was chasing a hollow dream, but I gained an apprentice, a fellow builder. And in the quiet workshop of our shared second chance, we began to build something new, something stronger, something that I believe would have made her mother very, very proud. The house was finally in order. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If Thomas' story inspired you, please give this video a like and share it with someone who needs to hear it. We'll see you in the next story.